What's up, everybody? This is Evan with the Lemons with Clemmons. Today, I have a guest feature of having my friend from college, Mitch Wahlen. He's here with me, and honestly, what we're going to be doing is a little bit different than what we're used to. It's not going to be about a specific topic that I'm just angry at. What more so, I just want to have a conversation, a dialogue, and there's nobody better that I know that could have a good conversation and good dialogue than Mitch. What I know of Mitch throughout time is that, first of all, he graduated with what is it, a public relations degree? I'm pretty sure. I don't think he uses it for anything, so I think this is this is his first time actually getting to use it. But we've always had the ability to have good conversations and get in depth. Even if we disagree, we can disagree without getting into the point of arguing or hating each other like a lot of people do nowadays. And I think this is going to be a good avenue to go to be able to show people, even if we disagree, that we're able to still be friendly. We're able to make good points with each other. And even if we disagree, it doesn't mean we have to hate each other and delete each other off of Facebook. He doesn't have a Facebook, just for the record, but it is something that it's something that I think is happening more and more, especially during the last couple years. Mitch, I think we were talking about a couple things about what you want to talk about, not specific to maybe something that I'm upset about. What's something that you want to talk about in general? Let's just have a conversation, man.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks for having me, Evan. I would agree that we've always had nothing but fantastic conversations. And sorry if my beard in the end really isn't as impressive as I hoped it'd be.
So for anybody right now that's listening, we're looking at each other through Skype or Zoom, or it's basically all the same at this point. It all does the same thing, but we're not doing audio yet because this is our first try at it. I think, depending on how this goes, we might continue doing these more often, and I have a good feeling about it. And maybe we'll add some, and he might trim his beard or grow it out, and I might do something with my face. Who knows? Anyway, what'd you have for me?
Yeah, I first of all love the idea of just come out here and have a conversation. You asked me to think of a couple of topics, and I started kind of delving into the platitudes, if you will, and so what do I want to talk about? Then I took some time to listen to the podcast, and I really love the idea of picking a lemon and squeezing it and seeing if the juice is worth it or not. To your point, though, this one perhaps is a little different because it's the two of us this time, and so I thought a really great conversation prompt to get us started is, in your opinion, what do you think mankind's greatest contribution is?
Mankind's greatest contribution. I think whenever I first heard that, I thought invention, and so I had so many ideas going in my head already. Contribution. So I guess with a question like that, I think you'd have to almost have a little more specificity. Oh my god, I can't even say it now. I've had too many drinks. Because are you thinking of a contribution as into the idea of the world itself, or to mankind to itself? Are you looking at mankind to its own human nature? Because there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad, but there's also mankind's contribution into where we are now. So I could go. There's several topics I'm thinking about in my head right now where my contribution of I keep wanting to go back to invention. Whenever you
Well,
think of a
let's.
contribution, if ever we're looking at society, a contribution to its own society, you know what I mean?
That's a good point. Actually, you may have just invented a fact. If it's a contribution only to your own species, does that make it an invention? Or what qualifies as invention versus contribution?
I guess
Which,
that's a solid point. Yeah,
yeah.
is it like an invention isn't necessarily a tool? It could be contribution to one's own society. If Webster already has that in there, then shit. Otherwise, I better add it.
I never trusted
So
Miriam anyways.
yeah, she's a bitch. Anyway, how about you specify, and we'll go with it.
Yeah, I kind of actually like maybe tackling it from both sides. Um, I think where my mind was as I was thinking about it is I was taking a look at just the world as it is today for all of its good and bad. And frankly, more often than not, I would just say gray. It's different now. And things aren't just left and right or black and white. We've got such a melting pot of issues, a melting pot of people, and I think more importantly, a melting pot of ideas, which kind of leads me to my point in that we as a species have the ability to critically think and analyze beyond just what you're looking at visually or hearing audibly. We have feelings. And so, how do we express that? And how do you tell someone how you feel about them? Well, I got to thinking about it, and I think our greatest contribution is actually quite simple, and I think it's language. Now, language is audible, language is body, it's haptic. You know, when you go to the drive-through and they take way too damn long and they're rude, you know, it's not necessarily on you to get pissed off or on you to not get pissed off, but I typically will just shake my head and move on. But that shaking your head, that's a sign of disapproval. And if they didn't know it, I sure did.
No, absolutely. No, I think you make a good point in just to do my own shameless plug on my previous podcast. If anybody is listening currently, the one over social media, I do talk about a little bit of communication, how it's fallen because of social media and with technology, as well as I go into it a little bit with driving, because and one thing I want to talk about it, you know, when you talk about that shaking of the head, it's 100% exactly what you're saying. Is if there's something about being in a car whenever road rage is completely different, because you're in the safety of your own vehicle, you're in your own safe space, so you can act however you want. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. So I think language goes so far, because I think technology, and if you want to talk about contributions to society right now, I think the technology that we have is a great contribution, but also our biggest flaw, because we're now talking to each other through emojis. We're simpling our conversations down to a matter of, I don't know, they just upped the limit on Twitter to like 100 and something characters. It was like 160, and I think they did it to like 200 something now. You know, so we're trying to make messages, some would say efficient, but I wouldn't go that. We're dumbing them down to get a certain message. But the thing is, with conversation, with language, is that there's a lot of context that gets lost in it. And just like you said, the idea behind, you know, haptics, you know, the tone of voice. So texting, the amount of context that's lost through a text message or through an email, the amount of times that I've had to get it and had to defend myself because something is misconstrued because of how I talk in general. I use and you should probably know this, I'm very big in how I use my tone and my body language more than my words. So I will say something, and the way I say it might sound completely different, but if you're talking to me in person, it's 100% different than what I would actually be saying with just the words. And so I think it leads to a lot of miscommunication. I think it leads to a lot of issues also. So I think if there's a way to get all that across, I think that is the contribution society needs, is to be able to somehow take all the information that we're trying to relay through our own bodies and through our own tone of voice and combine that into the message that we're trying to get across. I think we could get a lot further as a society as that. But unfortunately, we're at the point now, I think, that we're almost dumbing down society. And that's not just with how we talk to each other, which is a huge thing. I think the biggest thing of how we grow is the peer-to-peer growing. You know, if you look at children, they grow more in a school setting than at home in a lot of ways, because of the social fabric. Because we are a social species. We have to be around each other. You know, that's why there's a lot of depression when people can't get out. Something I mentioned on my most recent podcast about seasons, because in the winter we stay inside a lot and stay to ourselves a lot more, which is on top of, you know, the sun not being out and everything with the seasonal depression. You know, so it's, I don't know. There's so many avenues you can go with it. What do you got for me?
It does feel in a lot of ways like we're simplifying, perhaps as a means to just be more efficient. However, you were just talking about sending a text message, and what you say is lacking the body language and the tone of voice. Well, how can we make up for that? A la emoji. So I think that there's maybe a little bit on both sides there. So while the emoji it's odd that we've landed on the emoji as the manifestation of what's wrong with communication, but it makes a lot of sense.
Is it right or is it wrong though? That's a real question.
Yeah, well, it depends. Android, I've really been lacking on good emojis, but I figured out their value. Or an LOL. How many times have you typed LOL in your life?
Well, I mean, and how many times are you actually laughing out loud when you say that?
I actually announce that in the text if I'm truly laughing out loud.
Oh no, I do the exact same thing. Yes, yeah. I have to make sure they know when I'm saying LOL. Yes. It's 100% real. Yes. They have to know at that point. And you know what? I will take you one further. The emojis is one thing. GIFs are the new thing. Or is it GIF or is it GIF? I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure it's GIF. I'm going with it.
I'm still caught up on if it's meme or meme. So it could be either. But you're right. That might be the best contribution of those who graduated within the last 10 years. I sure love a good GIF, especially when it comes to expressing a reaction of something. And if you got a good couple ones in the queue, you're always prepared for, being able to deliver. Nothing's worse than a bad GIF.
Oh no, I think you can really just take a conversation to the right place, and I think I've in a conversation I've smiled or laughed more at a good GIF than like an emoji.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? It's a game changer when you just throw that in there. I'm just waiting for like my mom or dad to send me one. That'll change my life. I feel like.
Oh man, when my dad sent his first GIF, him and my stepmom, they just sit there and laugh at the GIFs that they search and find. They think it's I don't know, probably the best thing since sliced bread, because I'm pretty sure they were around for when bread started to get sliced. So it's a big deal for them. Big step forward.
So you're talking about emojis, you're talking about GIFs. What else though with society now? What is the contribution that you see? I guess I've been doing a lot of talking. What is the contribution that you see that we've given to society?
I think, going back, I think it's language, and I think language has blossomed into more. It's blossomed into all the different forms of expression: music, art, writing, poetry, and I think it really does matter. Few things are better than a captivating book, or listening to the right song at the right time and with the right people, or seeing a piece of artwork that somebody poured their heart and soul into that just speaks to you, or perhaps it brings your home together in a way that you couldn't find something else to do it. And I think that we're so quick to just overlook these things. Whereas if we were to have everything just, let's say, theoretically stripped. Do you ever watch the show Alone?
The one on Netflix, it just came out on Netflix, and I just started watching that, actually. I just watched the first episode the other night, and I'm already obsessed with it. I cannot wait to watch the next one tonight.
Yeah, well, let me, as a quick side note, who knew that the way to handle a bear is to tell it hello? So,
well, spoiler alert, I just saw the one guy just go up to it, like I'm going after him. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
These people have bigger balls than I ever will, including the girl on there.
Yes. Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that she wins, to be honest. But we'll find out.
Don't give it away. Don't give it away.
But if we were to have all those things stripped away from us, we'll go through a period of survival and reaction. But ultimately, we'll have to take a look at what's there and what we have. And we come back to, kind of the Maslow's 5 basic needs. But beyond that is what makes us human, I think. And that ability to have that conversation or to relate to another human being outside of just making animal noises. And that's not to suggest that animals can't convey love, because they certainly can too. And it's, as you might say, in a much more simple or perhaps even efficient way. But I think that's where our contribution is. And
so real quick, I'm going to cut you off. So you're talking about language and being able to express these things. It almost is less about language; it's more about our emotion. You mentioned love with an animal. You talk about a dog that comes and snuggles with you or whatever, or the cats do the same thing. And I think animals. I think you're absolutely right. It is almost more efficient because it's so simplified. Mm-hmm. But everything that you're conveying right now, to me, it's almost going is a contribution, the ability to convey our emotions in a better way, which again, I think that becomes just as important. I think almost more important than just communication and language in general, because for your loved ones, for your children, for your parents, what have you, being able to emote your emotion in the correct way, I think, is just as important as just having language and having a conversation.
Yeah, I could agree with that. But what about folks who are more stoic than they are emotional? Does that impede their ability to communicate? Perhaps in some ways, and for getting a message across, but I don't think that removes any depth from a person or what they're thinking or what they're feeling. And that's where I think other ways of expressing yourself come into play. Going back to books or music, or perhaps just turning around and giving somebody the cold shoulder.
Yeah. No, I mean, have you actually looked into the idea behind, you said Stoic, so Stoicism. Have you
Yes,
looked into that at all?
I have.
I think it's fascinating. A mentor of mine actually has just started showing me a bunch of these videos about Stoicism, and I find it, it's incredibly interesting, the idea to just be at peace and be happy with what is happening because you can't change it, I guess, and you can only control you. And I think that's actually the basis of most ideologies,
Buddhism
honestly.
for sure.
Yeah, exactly. In I that was something that I looked into a lot for a while there is at the end of the day, change is the only constant.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so, and once you get to understand that, I think there's a book called No Death, No Fear that completely changed my life, and it's by a Buddhist. His name is Thich Nhat Hanh.
Really, I would have guessed it would have been a Viking that wrote that book.
Yeah, no, it was a Viking. It's funny you say that. It was a samurai soldier Viking, Thich Nhat Hanh.
Seriously?
That no, absolutely not. I
Oh,
just
this
made that
person
up.
became my hero briefly.
No, but no, he talks about, change is like death is the idea of like a flower dies, but it doesn't actually die. It comes back next season, but it's not the same flower that it was before. It's just changed now because it's not going to grow the same petals. It's not going to grow the exact same cells. In the same way, every breath you take in, you're bringing in new air, and your cells are constantly replicating and always changing. So every second is actually different than the second before. So we have to understand that the idea of change is a constant, no matter what, whether it's through death, where even the flowers that don't come the next year, they go into the ground and help bring new life, or through every breath that we take that begins a new life also within ourselves. I think it's a fascinating idea, and I think it changes your outlook on life a lot.
Yeah, I would agree. And I love that quote. And it's one that I think of often is that change is the only constant. And it's you either grow with it or you don't. But nonetheless, it's going to happen.
So would you say that with that idea in mind, do you think humanity's contribution actually is being able to find that logic and that philosophy in life? Or do you think it's still the idea of being able to convey the message?
Probably a little bit of both, if I'm being honest with the question. Um, people generally, I think, from a very young age, I think it's 6 months is when a baby actually first starts to learn how to lie. And it's usually by way of fake crying until they get the attention that they want. But people themselves, as things change or a situation changes, do different things with their emotions. For example, take a well-behaved child that's always happy-go-lucky, that does something stupid at recess, kid gets hurt, teacher asks the kid about it, and the kid lies about it. This kid's never lied before, at least not since they were crying at 6 months old trying to get attention from their parent. Is that kid, or that child, I guess, because that kid can also be a goat, is that child adopting with change, or are they resisting change? Are they adopting with the change that their standing is maybe not so good, or are they resisting change by lying about it so that their standing can stay good?
Well, I think there's too many factors in that, because you have to look at and this is where you're getting into a whole new uh, sociology type of way of thinking, because there is an entire spectrum of thinking when you look at kids on a playground. Okay, so the idea that the kid that got hurt, got accidentally bumped by somebody and doesn't want to get them in trouble. So he might lie about that because for some reason, and I know this through my own experience of have my own son, that they don't want to get somebody else in trouble for something that was, harmless. So they might make for them it's a fib, it's a white lie. So there's a difference in the white lies, the fibs, and then the full blown lies. And then I think that you also have a certain way of looking at what are you protecting in your tribe. If you look at humans as a species, as a mammalian species, we're very tribal in a sense. That's why we have cliques when you're in school. That's why certain kids only play together at the playground because we become very tribal, and so you protect your tribe even when one person in that tribe is doing something wrong, and it's something that I feel like we naturally gravitate towards, even if it's not the correct thing. And that's where I think we have a lot of problems where the kids fall in, and that's why I think now that I'm older and I'm just now realizing this as I'm having this conversation all the times. My parents have told me, like, don't hang out with those kids. You know what I mean? Like, they tell you don't be with those people. But maybe it's because it becomes a tribal thing. And the tribal thing is where the peer pressure comes from. You want to stay inclusive with that tribe, so you're doing a lot more things with that tribe, with your friends at that point, that you wouldn't do without them there. And I think that's a normal thing. Even as I got older, there's things that I've done that I only did because I was around other people, I'm pretty sure, or around certain people. And then you might tell things or you won't tell things to protect that community that you've made.
Sure. I think that's fair. You made an interesting comment about lies, white lies, fib, the great big lies.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the whole great big election lie is standing out in my head for some reason, because that's the new way we associate that expression. But why is there a scale? Is a fib philosophically different than a big lie or a lie about something serious? Philosophically, I understand that the gravity of the situation and how there can be ramifications and larger impacts, but philosophically speaking, aren't they both innately wrong when it comes to resisting change?
I mean, if you want to look at the idea, like you said before, that the world is not just black and white, absolutely, they're both wrong. But then you become into what we are growing more, I think, now, and as a society in general, we are growing. And I think you hit it at I think the very first thing you said is that everything is a lot more gray now. And I think that's almost how life in general is going. And I think that's where we're falling into, where the fibs and the white lies become the gray area. Why are we doing it? Is the child thinking that it's meaningless to talk about it, or they're just, maybe a lot of times, maybe they just don't want to talk about it. So they say something didn't happen and they don't even want to, they're just avoiding a conversation in general. It's not that big of a deal. There's no gravity behind it. It might not even be anything. It's like when you get home from school, when you were younger, when you got home, how was school? What happened? Nothing. It was fine. Well,
Where's
shit
my
happened.
snack?
Yeah, literally. Something happened during that entire time, but nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not a lie philosophically? So then you get into the gray area. So you're going into an entire different spectrum at that point, where you're almost, when did we learn that behavior though?
Mm-hmm.
And
6 months.
6 months, 100%. So because we are getting recognition for that behavior. And so is that something that you can stamp out? Or is that something that is just what we do as a human species, because it's our species as a whole is built to adapt and survive? And sometimes it's not just environmentally, but socially, economically, physically, etc.
I think that same concept applies to really all forms of life, is that the ability to adapt and survive. And if you can't adapt, you go extinct. Frankly, I think that if humans go extinct, it'll be at our own hands. And as far as like contributions to the world, all I can think of is the damage that we've done to it. But I do think, going back to that gray area, I think that our society, well, whoever's living is always in the evermost present modern version of society. I think we're at another point of evolution. And I think things are going to change drastically. And that's, I guess, probably kind of a duh statement. And that's just how history works, is that things change over time. But in all reality, if I was to look at a map of the world today and the countries and their respective borders, I truthfully don't think that map is going to be the same in 50 years. Maybe it's 100 years, maybe it's 150. But those borders aren't going to be the same. As countries, we refer to it as globalization from an economic standpoint, from a communication standpoint. But in all reality, we're just a bigger melting pot than we used to be. And that is going to continue to grow. The world is small, and it took a long time for me to just really understand that expression. And not at the surface level, but really when you kind of dive in deeper to it and you think about that. And perhaps to this point in time, it's not my fucking business what Russia or China or Iran or the UK or what somebody in Kansas is doing, right? That's not my business. That's their business. But the world's small. So I hear about it. It becomes a subject of discussion and people talk about these things. And all of a sudden, we take something that is completely outside of our sphere, we bring it in, we formulate an opinion on it based on the philosophies that we have built over time.
So there's a lot that you just put in there. So I'm going to try to dissect it a little bit. But I think first of all, I think you're right on. I don't think anybody truly thinks that the entire world as a globe, as a map, is going to be the same here in 100 to 150 years. I think that is, I mean, if you just look at history, or if you have a brain that works, if you have a frontal cortex that has something that works, borders are constantly changing. And it might be even something that is not on the news today. It'll be something that happens even 20 years from now, 30 years from now, maybe. But you not only have the idea that that's constantly changing, but how we react to it is constantly changing. So like you said, globalization is happening at an economic level. But so as a business, globalization looks good because you're outsourcing work for a different wage and getting different, based on different laws of another society, of another country, you can output more work for less cost. And at the end of the day, if we're looking at globalization as a business tactic, I think it can be catastrophic to the human race. Okay,
I think so too.
I think it can be extorted and taken advantage of, as it already had. How many times have you heard about Nike and sweatshops in China? You know what I mean? So that, I mean, that's just an example, but it's not all like that. Sometimes it can't be very good. You have globalization, but you have to look at the idea of, okay, hold on. Before I go into that, the idea that you were talking about, like, it doesn't matter what Russia's doing or China's doing or Kansas is doing. It all now matters more than it ever did. And I think that's kind of the point you were trying to relate to a little bit, that it's all a lot more important because everybody has an effect on each other now more than they ever did before. What China does is going to impact us a lot more.
I agree. And I think I was thinking at it from a different height than you were. When I say in Russia or China, I think about an individual or
okay.
Yep.
So I was still looking at the business aspect of it, but no,
right.
no. So I mean, individually, right now it doesn't connect, but one day I think it's going to be more important because let's take right now. We're now coming out of the pandemic, of a huge coronavirus thing. Why does it not matter right now the individual in China that experienced it first?
Why does it not matter?
Exactly.
I think that it does matter.
Exactly. But, so maybe you should worry about that person that it's happening to.
Well, I think I would argue that that's at a different height, though. That one person, let's just say, and I don't want to just say that there's just one person out there who's to blame. Maybe there is. Hell, I don't know. But that grew to something bigger than an issue within a small group of people. Of course, the true measure of a person is understanding just how many lives they do touch. And that's slightly separate from what we're talking about. But I guess perhaps as I've gotten older, have realized more and more that sometimes it's just none of my goddamn business.
No, 100%. But
you know,
then you're just getting worked up over nothing.
I agree, and people spend a lot of time getting worked up over nothing because I mean that's what we really kind of only have two base emotions, and it's either good or we feel good or we feel bad, and that bad kind of splits off into mad or jealous or and just like on the good, it's happy and joyous or full. And I know I'm always a little bit happier after I eat, and I'm always a little madder after I have to start work for the day. But
well, so wait, hold on a second. You're talking about everything comes down to the idea between those two basic emotions, which I absolutely agree with. Honestly, if you want to simplify things 100%, yes, we're simplifying it down to that. But what about the idea that we need something to get worked up about? Because our contribution to society now is to be interconnected.
Is that our contribution?
Maybe we're circling back to contribution. We're back to it. All right.
But is that our contribution? Is that our responsibility now?
Now apparently it is. Now everything is now a global issue. People over in China and Australia and Israel are all worried about what's going on with us now. And we worry about what's going on in Mexico and Australia and Japan and China and everybody everywhere else. Is that now the interconnectedness? Is that where we're at now?
I think that is quite literally the next step in evolution, as in the evolution of society. Today's values are much different than they were 50 years ago. Today's Democrats will be the Republicans in 30 or 40 years. That's just the way things shift. They go from left to right, and then right becomes left. Left becomes right.
Well,
write that down.
Yeah, that's one. That's the one that's getting edited out. All right. But without getting too political, all right. I think though, now that you talk about globalization, you talk about looking at everything being interconnected, how much more does it progress now that going into space is becoming a bigger deal? You look at Jeff Bezos doing the blue dream or blue what the fuck is this thing?
That was my favorite. It was one of my favorite weeds when I was in college.
I believe you.
Buds, the blue dream. You don't remember? I remember that.
I believe you on that one. It just can't. It's something that I just saw somebody just won an auction to be able to go with them to do it. Like Blue Cloud. I don't know what it's called. And then you have Elon Musk with his deal going on. With SpaceX going to Mars. Then you have Virgin Galactic with their space shuttles as well. So I think you're right on the idea of we're going into a new evolutionary stage with mankind, because we're about to be looking at the world as a globe rather than individual countries, because we're going to be having to look at things at a larger scale. Or maybe when you're in space, maybe it's a smaller scale at that point, I guess, because you're looking down on, as they say, the marble in space.
I'll tell you what, I think we got some shit to solve here before we go up to space. But if we go up to space and spend our time looking down, then we've done it wrong. If we go to space, we need to continue looking up and around and out.
I love that idea. No, I think you're right, but I think I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, because I think maybe the idea of getting to space, because we're all in it together and we're all trying to look out, I think that is one of the things that brings us together.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a struggle and needs a cause to unite behind, but I don't think that's the case. I don't think that it's everybody getting on the same bandwagon to get to space. I think that that's probably going to be the next great battle. Is space and satellites, and
who can do it better and who can do it bigger.
Yeah. Who can get a community of people set up on the moon or Mars or wherever the fuck it is.
Right.
I know I'm gonna still be here in the Midwest, where we have 3.5 seasons, because spring is only half a season these days, which is slightly sad. But as a kid,
I feel like you're just doing a push for my most recent podcast, and I appreciate that.
Would you like to do a shameless plug real quick?
Was it obvious? The latest episode that just came out before this one airs is obviously going to be about the seasons. That was a clinking of glasses. I fill my glass up, and this is going to be about the seasons and how in Missouri The seasons all suck. That's 100% real. Mitch, you know this. If you want to talk a little bit about how bad the seasons are in Missouri, go right ahead.
I love a little bit about all of the seasons. The rest of the time, I think about the good times. It's kind of like when your nose is stuffed. And you spend all the time thinking about how life was before it was stuffed, and just how you really took that for granted. And I feel the same way. Like I walked outside earlier and I thought, what in the fuck? I walked back inside. And then back outside
100%.
later, because I work inside, I work remote these days. So I try to make it a point of going out in the sun. But when you go out there in the sun and it decides that it wants to attack you, I think of that meme of that guy that's just got a gun and he's pointing right up at the sun and it says enough.
No, I absolutely agree. And that's what I was talking about a little bit in the podcast. I know you didn't listen to it because it came out literally 2 hours before we did this anyway. But it is a constant battle to figure out. I think you nailed it, because it's either we're enjoying it or we're bitching about it, or we're thinking back on the memories of when it was good.
Mm-hmm.
When we're younger, we could run around in this heat in the sun. I used to be so dark when I was younger. I would run around and do everything because I was so tan. It didn't matter. I didn't burn because I was in the sun so much. And now I even look at the sun and I'm pretty sure my cornea burns.
God, that must have been nice. I spent my whole summer growing up as a burnt Irish, Swedish ancestral boy. Just go outside and you got to douse yourself in sunscreen. If you don't, you're going to fucking pay.
Yeah, I think that's a constant battle with a lot of people. So here's a question. Now that you're talking about your Irish, what is
Irish and Swedish. I am like 60% sure that I'm related to Ragnar Lothbrok.
Yeah, is that based on the series or ancestry.com?
It's a little bit of both. We're traced back to Vikings, and I guess there was a king somewhere in our bloodline. When I found out about it, I didn't stay to listen about more of the history. My immediate thought is we need to figure out which family took us out and plot our revenge and our rise back to the top. Anyways, I digress.
No, my dad actually has been getting real big into ancestry.com, and it's got me interested into looking back on the family history. I think it's super important actually to look at where you come from and where your roots are. And it turns out there's a lot of French ancestry in us, where apparently one of our ancestors was the mayor of London. That was a pretty neat thing.
That is cool.
That's about it, though. That's about the hierarchy. As
far as
I don't know. That was about the hierarchy of where we were at.
Yeah.
As far as I know, other than the stories. My grandfather had just passed away a few months ago, and we were going through his things, and we found a Bible, where one of his was either his mother or his grandmother. So we're talking several generations at this point. Wrote the entire ancestry information that she knew of at that point. We're talking about this person had this kid who married this person, did this person went on the Oregon Trail to California. We're talking, I was on the front and the back of the Bible throughout. It was super interesting.
And the book of Genesis continued.
Yeah, absolutely. It felt biblical at that point.
Yeah. I am Mitch, son of Steve, second of his name.
That's exactly how it read too, which was really funny. Where it was I don't even know the names. It was Mark, son of Jerry, and I'm not even going to try
wow.
to. I don't know. I can't even make it
up.
A
French mayor named Jerry. Now I all of a sudden want to talk about French Revolution, but I don't know much about it.
I'm not versed enough in that, unfortunately.
Well, you should be. I think your uncle was behind it. I watched this documentary. It's called I Am. It's by Tom Shadyac, who's a director, worked with Jim Carrey on a lot of films, like Ace Ventura as an example. Fantastic documentary. One of the best ones I've ever watched. Not necessarily because it was so well put together. It was, but just the message behind it. And one of the questions he asked in that is, what's wrong with us and how do we fix it? And that is a really large question, and maybe something worthy of its own episode on on your lemons, and that came out wrong.
Don't you ever talk about my lemons that way.
But the thought is, we're in this world that, particularly on the Western Hemisphere, or actually just really any Protestant or Christian related religion, there's a lot of emphasis on material things. And we, as a society, both at home and abroad, continue to struggle to get along. Some of that, as you talked about, just like being a kid, you go to school and you learn how to socialize and how to fit in with others and how to problem solve in discussions and disagreements, and things get more serious, and so do the consequences as we get older. Blah, blah. We have things like fights and then wars and then great world wars. But what is it that brought us to this point? Can we associate it to one thing? How do you define what it is exactly that's wrong? If you can, how do you fix it?
Ego and envy.
So you think it goes back to two of the deadly sins?
100%. I mean, honestly, all of it, it becomes the greed, ego, envy. I mean, you look at all the past world wars, the big wars that happened before the world wars were about ego and envy and greed. It was about getting more land. If somebody said no to marrying your daughters, all right, fuck you, I'm going to take over your country anyway then, instead of building a relationship. Or that person has what I want and I'm going to have it, which goes into envy. So I think you're looking at it also. I mean, you're looking at the 7 deadly sins. I think you're leaning a lot into religion at that point. But I think when you're looking at Protestant and Christian, I think a lot of those countries that became Protestant and Christian ended up also going more capitalist. And I think what you're looking at is capitalism when you go back to the materialism about everything, because I think materialism comes from the idea of envy again, where you're wanting to show that you're successful in this capitalist world. So you have to have materials. And so great example is my own mom. She used to tell me, I'm trying to live the American dream. I want all the best, nicest stuff. And she put herself in debt just to have nice couches and recliners and TVs and
living rooms growing up, huh?
I had 2 living rooms. One was a family room, one was a living room for no reason. It wasn't, we didn't have a good TV, but she wanted everything to look nice, everything be new. And she went out of her way to paint stuff all the time because her idea was the American dream was for everything to be nice. And so I think that goes into the idea that materialism, I think, is a dark sin from one of the deadly sins, I would say, from capitalism, if you looked at economics in a religious standpoint.
So I guess 2 things. I don't necessarily think capitalism is wrong. I think it's imperfect. And I
agree. I think capitalism is great, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's the best we have to this point. Kind of to my points earlier. We're still evolving. Capitalism is not the end of the road. There'll be something better, hopefully, eventually. But the nice things, that existed well before capitalism did. When you think about the kings and queens and...
Well, it showed value.
It's what?
It shows value.
It does. Value, and what matters as value, has changed over time. I seem to recall that historically, the heavier you were, the more indicative was that you had food on your plate, which meant that you had a way to pay and purchase that food and enough of it.
That's why a lot of chieftains were always very large. A lot of chiefs of tribes were always the bigger people there, and they had the many wives.
I always associated with it was just they had a power gut. That's how it did. But I think that we lost track of the way somewhere, and we've kind of lost, so to speak, our northern star. I do not think that it is a life worth living, nor do I think it was ever meant to be for people to fly a desk for a job and to work behind a computer. However, we're here. How can we adopt the principles of what's right and apply it to what today is? Electricity, really most of what makes America so grand is electricity. You lose electricity, we lose really all of it, and kind of go back to what it was in the Wild West days, except we'll have a lot more mouths than we do food. feed is for farm animals.
Glad you think of me that way.
Well, but I guess to carry out my long-winded point / question is, where is it that we've gone wrong? And perhaps the answer is that we haven't.
I mean, I think the idea behind trying to evolve and trying to do better and progress as a society is also where we go wrong. So if you're looking for a reason we went wrong or where we went wrong, there's 1,000 different times that we've messed up, but we've come out ahead in the end because we are where we are now. So if you're a person that wants to look back and like, I messed this up, I fucked this up, like the people that obsess over old relationships, that's what that sounds like to me almost, because like, where did we go wrong? What happened to us? Well, we're here now. And again, this goes back to the idea that we were talking about earlier, Stoicism. We're here now, so let's be happy with where we're at and how do we progress it now? But you're looking at the idea that, and then one thing I really wanted to touch on is you talked about the idea of people in cubicles and everything, and office workers. No, we weren't meant for that by any means. I think that's almost becoming the new modern day slave of what used to be. That's the modern day farm workers, where they're getting what they want out of it. I mean, they're getting paid for it, and they're getting paid a lot better than what they did as the farm hands back in the day. But it's not the means that where we need to be now. But unfortunately, where we are now is based on breaking the backs of thousands and millions of people to gain very little, or to gain a lot for very little people.
Agreed. You think about it, today we have the luxuries, even better luxuries than the kings and queens of old. Air conditioning.
Even the people in poverty right now live better than kings.
Yep.
They're back in 200 years ago.
Yep. I totally agree, especially from a comfort standpoint. And that's not to minimize any of the hardships that folks have today, because we all have them, and some worse than others. But it is a different standard of living today than it was back then. And back then really refers to any time before the technological revolution. I will say I am super pleased with how far we've come with sanitation standards. I was watching a documentary the other day, and it was sharing how one of the preferred methods of wiping your ass was corn cobs, and I really tried to imagine that.
I prefer butter.
Butter
on my corn cob.
Oh, okay. I was sitting there thinking, rub your ass with some butter and it just falls out, or what?
Just to specify.
Well, I'm glad to know that much about you. Keep the butter on the cob. There's your next episode. That's random, but there is quite the debate on whether or not butter's good or bad for you. It's got some fat properties to it, but generally speaking, and in the health experts that I've talked to, go for the butter.
The health experts. Well, I'm glad that you're in touch with all those. I will say, what's interesting about that's actually an idea that I have in one of my podcasts, and I have a bunch of notes on it about diet and nutrition of what's going on now, because how many times has it changed? The amount of times that the food pyramid has even changed that we were taught in school back in whenever it started. I know in the 90s when I heard it, it was one way, and then all of a sudden it started changing to something different. And now they don't even do a pyramid anymore, is what I've heard. I don't know if that's true or not. I might be full of shit, but they told us don't do certain types of fats, but actually those fats are good, so you should do those fats. Don't do the fake sugars. And before that, it was do the fake sugars but no, apparently those are carcinogenic. And now all of a sudden it's going to be this fat or butter was something bad. Steaks were bad, but no, they're actually good now, and they're good for you. I just stick with, in my opinion, what the world gives you is probably what's good for you. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, without trying to go all very, I guess you could almost call it hippie or lifestyle or what, I don't know what they call it now, but without going all that, the idea of olive oil I think is good for you. Use olive oil. I think use use butter if it's real butter. I think margarine is a scam.
I think it's like 3%. Like its molecular build is like 3% away from plastic or some shit like that.
Yeah. Don't use that shit because it's oil at the end of the day, but made to be hard.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
And you need to really stress this with your listeners. Don't eat margarine.
I'm super serious about this. But margarine's a bunch of bullshit. I think actual real butter is good for you. I think if you're but is it good for you though? You're looking at butter and you're looking at without going into a crazy amount of topics right now, you look at butter, where's that come from? Comes from milk from a cow. Why are we the only species that is drinking milk from another animal?
We're the only species smart enough to do it.
That's a point I've never heard. To be honest, I've never had anybody say that to me.
You're welcome.
And absolutely, but maybe that changes things. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's why. But I guess I've seen a cat drink the milk I give them. Well, not for me personally.
Out the bowl.
Yeah, not for me personally. Not like my milk. You can't milk me.
I don't know, man. The way you got with that butter, I'm a little concerned.
Super serious about my butter. But at the end of the day, I think when you're talking about food and stuff, I think food is an incredibly important topic. I think that really needs to be expanded on.
Just nutrition in general.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's something that is lost now. I think there's too many. I don't even believe the science that comes out anymore because everybody tells you something different. It's constantly changing. What I truly believe is the idea that it is different per person. But I think at the end of the day, and that comes to like protein and carbs and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think you need to keep it without being processed is the best thing for you, without getting all the bullshit chemicals. If you can't understand or read what's on the label, then it's probably not good for you. Mm-hmm. I'm still going to eat the fuck out of it because food is now less about health and more about convenience.
I agree. I think that health in general becomes a priority in your life at one point or another, either by choice or by force, unfortunately. And I do think that it's important to be cognizant of the things that we put into our bodies and at least understand the health risks associated with it. There was a lot, just kind of like there's debate about butter. There's debate about whether eggs are good or not for you because of the cholesterol. And then there's the bad cholesterol and then there's the good cholesterol. But the reality is, and it's my least favorite quote of all time because it just doesn't have that, really pontification ring to it, but everything in moderation. From how much working out you do, to how much fat you put into your body, to how much beer you drink. No, beer doesn't really deliver a ton of health nutrients to you, but health is not limited to just your body. It's your mind, it's your soul. If having a couple of drinks loosens you up and allows you to really have a great time with people, by all means.
Now, I will say there's a lot of information about actually not going crazy, 1 or 2 drinks is actually good. Mm-hmm. If you are somebody that works out because it is what is that? Not a vasoconstrictor, but it opens up your blood vessels and it allows more blood to go into your muscles and whatnot to help them heal a little bit faster. Not going to be like life changing.
Isn't that what Lance Armstrong's whole argument was on how he was able to win? Going through his treatment, wasn't it some stuff like that? I don't know.
I still haven't watched. I still haven't watched that documentary on him, so I'm not sure.
What a guy.
Isn't that a thing that we learn most of our information from documentaries now?
Yeah.
And so what if everything in a documentary isn't even real? What if we're just being fed documentaries and bullshit that it's not real? Now,
there are probably some people out there that make documentaries with an agenda to misinform, which is really a problem with the news. If you don't watch it, you're uninformed. If you do watch it, you're misinformed. I think you need to be able to watch more than just one side of things. And for the most part, people aren't smart, but a person is smart. But a person can, using deductive reasoning, can, I think, come pretty close to the truth. Is COVID, and I mean this with the absolute sensitivity, because I know it was a real thing and it's affected a lot of people. But is it as bad and as terrible as CNN made it out to be? Probably not, but it's also worse than it was made out to be on, like Fox News as an example. And so I kind of found myself somewhat sitting in the middle of both sides of that, and was helpful to me because, there was a lot of social discovery and just general understanding of who folks were and how they thought. And, it's, I know that kind of leads us into a much, much, much larger spectrum of subject, but generally speaking, I think you're right. Not all the time, but on this subject, I think you're generally right.
Well, I'll take what I can get. I love being able to hear that, and thank God I'm recording. But I mean, I think you're right. I think that does spark an entire another conversation that I think we could go for hours on that. Real quick though, for those that are listening, please go to the Facebook page for the Lemons with Clemmons. Go ahead and like that page. If you're on Spotify, make sure you hit that follow button. That way that you do get alerts whenever a new episode comes out. And then also, we are on YouTube. I know there's not a lot of video yet. It's just a picture with my voice on it. But go ahead and subscribe to that, like it, and watch it. And hopefully, we will soon have video on there. It's just another way to listen to it. Make sure you are listening. And I do appreciate everybody that comes in, especially having a guest like Mitch being able to have this conversation. I want to be able to continue to do this, and I want you all to continue to let us know that you like what you're hearing, because we're going to keep bringing these type of discussions to you if you do like it. And if it's something that you're more interested in than just me ranting and rambling and going on my tangents, then I think I'm 100%, even if he disagrees, 100% going on doing these with Mitch. And I will force him into it. So make sure you do hit that like button. Send us a comment, all right? Because he will be reading them too. I guarantee it now that he's on it. I don't know if he read it before, but now that he's on it, he's going to be looking and wanting to know, hey, was this worth it or not? So let him know at the very least that this was worth it. I think it's a good point. And again,
was the lemon juice worth the squeeze?
Was the lemon juice worth the squeeze? And that's something that I haven't really pushed on. My entire idea of a setup is to just sit here with a bowl of lemons. Just with a bowl of lemons sitting to the side and just say, and here's a lemon, and take a bite out of a raw lemon.
I'm picturing white shirt eating a beef.
Yeah,
right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not even talking like a sliced lemon. I'm talking about the full thing, like it's an apple. You just gotta really go for it. It's all about the clicks. Okay. Is that where we're wrong as a society?
That's where we got it right again. No, in all seriousness, Evan, I've enjoyed this conversation. I know that we certainly jumped all over the place, which, frankly, I don't know why you and I even tried to select a topic or a series of topics, because this is just how we have conversations. We've talked about language. We've talked about people going to the moon, and if they get there, they better look up, not down. We've had a couple of fantastic and well-timed lemon puns, mostly by myself. I enjoyed talking about this range of subjects, particularly the fact that I'm hoping that anybody else who's listening enjoys the fact that we are able to jump from subject to subject to subject, and there's not really any guardrails. Other than that, man, just thanks for having me on. Look forward to doing another show with you. And, if you have any comments, questions, or insults, be sure to direct them at Evan.
Well, what I will say is I really liked this experience. In all honesty, I like the ability. We've always been able to have a good conversation no matter what. And I've enjoyed it. I think it'll be more enjoyable for those that are listening also, compared to, like I said earlier, me just rambling and ranting on. This is something you didn't have to do. You didn't have to spend your time having a conversation with me. Yes, it was all over the place. Yes, it was different than my regular range of lemons of things that just frustrate me. But it was just a good conversation. I think that was worth having. I think there's more conversations that are worth having if you're willing to come on. And I'd like to continue what we're doing and continue moving forward, because I think starting a good conversation is almost more important than just sitting and bitching about things. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's incredibly important to when you talk about the idea of what is something that we can give back to society, our contribution, maybe a good conversation.
Mm.
Maybe at the end of the day, that's what we need. The ability to have a discussion, have a debate, be able to digest that information in a way that is healthy without causing backlash, and being able to tell each other that we disagree without causing hate. Maybe at the very least, it'll get through to somebody or spark an idea to have somebody else do another conversation. I think that is almost more important. I think that's the contribution to society too. When you're talking about the idea of where did we go wrong? Well, if we did go wrong, maybe that's how we fix it. And so with that said, thank you so much for taking the time. We've spent well over an hour having these conversations, whether or not it be because you don't know how to run your laptop and sit it on a desk. All right. And hopefully for those that are listening, the audio quality is good enough. This is the first time trying to do something through a virtual. I don't know if this is an interview or just a discussion. Really, it's hard to say what it is, but I liked it. I'm pleased with it, and this is before even doing the editing. So hopefully we can make it into something else. And again, those that are listening, make sure you go and leave a comment. Let us know what you think. I know Mitch is going to be extremely excited to see how much he is just annoying you. So it's incredibly important for you all to get on there and let him know that. Otherwise, Mitch, thank you so much for coming on. And without having a bad thing to really talk about it, at the end of the day, you are the lemon. So
damn. Did not see that coming.
So thank you so much. And this is Evan with the Lemons with Clemmons.